everyone, to Science from the Fringe, a new special feature. I am Bryce Nichols. I'm a professor of genetics at Rutgers and a co-founder of Biosafety Now. And I'm here today with what he says we're good friends. I call us friends, but he says we're good friends. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya of Stanford University, where I just was the other week attending this wonderful conference. Jay, how are you doing this evening?
I was doing great until I understood that our friendship had been downgraded one step from good friends to just. I mean, I didn't.
Oh no,
I mean,
it's that you consider me a good friend, but I consider you just a friend.
Oh, the asymmetry is just okay. Still okay with you. That's just
Okay.
making sure that was the case. Okay, got it.
So we are here because we are going to run this very unique. I guess what are we calling this? A feature? It's a feature, a new feature, which is called Can I Respond Please? And what Can I Respond Please is it's a way in which we can go back in time and allow Jay to respond in situations where he wasn't really allowed to respond. So the first such instance where we're going to go back in time and have Jay respond when he wasn't really given a chance to respond is we're gonna go back to November of 2021. Who could forget when Jay testified at the hearing on combating coronavirus cons and the monetization of misinformation? This was the Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic when it was run by the Democrats, and they brought in Jay. Let's see, they brought in Jay to really just thank him for all of his hard work. Is that accurate, Jay?
Okay, so it's November 2021. The Delta wave has just swept through the American South. There's obviously going to be more COVID coming in the winter. Everyone's all nervous. There's a lot about that. The lockdowns are kind of looming in the background again. And there's just a deep worry in the US Congress about people taking advantage of it by spreading misinformation. I had been invited by the Republicans on the committee, and I think I was the only Republican invited expert on that panel. And I decided that I would focus attention on the misinformation spread by the government, and in particular about the censorship efforts that I had seen happen on the part of the government to suppress true information online regarding immunity after COVID recovery, regarding the harms of school closures and whatnot, the lack of justification for masking toddlers, which I'm not understanding. I still have no understanding why the American Public Health wanted that. And I gave testimony, which I prepared out, where I think I might have been the first person in this context to use the words "Ministry of Truth" to characterize the effort to censor people who didn't agree on toddler masking, for instance. Essentially this all of government effort to suppress criticism of COVID policy by the Biden administration.
Let's see. So you want to set up exactly what in exchange we're going to do in this first episode of Can I Please Respond?
Yeah. So this exchange is probably my lowest point in the entire pandemic. Just for those of you listening, emotionally, well, maybe there are a couple of lower points, but it is pretty close to rock bottom for me, Bryce. This was an exchange with a Democratic representative from Illinois named Raja Krishnamoorthi. I'd written an op-ed in this Indian newspaper called The Print. I don't know why there isn't a The Print in the United States. There kind of seems like with a name like that, which is so fantastic, there ought to be. Anyway, so I'd written this piece with a very simple calculation. There's about 6 or 7% of the Indian population is over the age of 65. Still, if you do the calculation out of 6 or 7% of 1.4 billion, you still don't have enough doses to cover, even with 100 million doses, to cover that. And there was another fact, which if you looked at the literature in 2020 into 2021, it was abundantly clear that people who had previously had COVID had significant protection against severe disease on reinfection. In fact, until you had another variant, you had protection even against reinfection. Lots and lots of studies out of Israel, out of Qatar, and elsewhere that had shown this exact fact. Denmark, I mean, a whole bunch of a bunch of epidemiological studies, to my mind, had convincingly established this fact. And there were a whole bunch of seroprevalence studies out of India as early as July 2020 that found that a substantial fraction of the Indian population had already had COVID and recovered. Certainly by January 2021, I mean, some estimates were as high as 50, 60% of the Indian population. So I just did a calculation. I said, look, if you use the doses that you have, I'm not saying don't go get more doses. What I said is like, well, what do you do with the 100 million doses you have now? If you use the doses you have and you want to use it to protect human life, sort of the best, what you do is you identify those older people over 65 who've never had COVID before and prioritize them for vaccination.
But should we go to the tape and see what others thought at the time? I mean, let's hear the other side of this discussion.
Since the pandemic began, Americans across the country have been targeted by an unprecedented level of misinformation about the coronavirus.
Now, Jay, do you want me to pause it at any point so you can respond, or should we just run it through, or how do you want to do this?
Why don't we pause it? I would like the chance for this to be paused, and then we can just sort of what was the title of this little series that we have going on? May I respond, please?
Hold on. Can I respond to that, please? I think because I believe this is what you say. That might be what you say to Raskin. I'm not sure if you say it here, but we will run the tape and we'll see. But okay, I will.
But if I raise my finger, Bryce, I would love to respond.
Yielding back, the chair now recognizes Mr. Krishnamoorthi for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can leave it there. Dr. Bhattacharya.
One thing, Jay, is that how you pronounce your name? Or is that a little bit of not a great pronunciation there?
I think he was trying to like pronounce it like an Indian might pronounce it, but I have to say that my cousins in India who make fun of how I myself pronounce it, I think they laugh uproariously at my American accent. He also would. I think my cousins would laugh at how he pronounces my name. Let's just say that.
Okay, so he begins with mispronouncing your name, which of course
to be fair, I mispronounce my own name, so I'm not gonna hold him to account for that.
All right, and we'll put a pin in that and come back to the discussion of whether it's possible to mispronounce your own name. But here we go.
On January 11th, 2021, you and Mr. Sanjeev Agarwal wrote an article in an Indian periodical, The Print, entitled "Majority Indians Have Natural Immunity," correct?
Okay, can I respond, please?
Okay, yes.
So I did not choose the headline. Just FYI, it's just like you would expect in any newspaper. You don't get to choose the headline. That you can see from the headline. What he said was that the headline was "Majority Indians have natural immunity," meaning that there were seroprevalence studies that had been conducted by reputable scientific organizations in India that had found that at least half of Indians had already had COVID and recovered based on antibody evidence. That was the headline. Of course, the focus of the piece was on how do you allocate the COVID vaccines to save life, the available COVID vaccines in India to save life at the sort of highest rates with them.
Was the article just said majority Indians have natural immunity? Was it also had, it's vaccinating entire population can cause great harm?
Yeah, so that was the headline, not written by me.
Okay.
The reason for vaccinating the entire population, I mean, if I'm trying to put myself in the foot of the feet of the headline writers, is if you vaccinate the population without regard to the benefit of the vaccine, that is, for instance, you don't prioritize older people, you don't prioritize people who've never had COVID before, you'll end up with less protection from the vaccines for the people that do get vaccinated because they're at lower risk than the people you don't vaccinate, leaving the people that are high risk unvaccinated when the Delta surge comes through.
Okay. All right, so here we go back to the interrogation, as I like to call it.
I said I cited some seroprevalence data around
Yes,
this.
you said majority Indians have natural immunity. And in that article, you said, quote, India is reaching very high levels of natural immunity. You said that, right?
The article argued for vaccinating older people in
And
India.
you said, and this is January 11th, 2021, you said there are reasons for optimism at the beginning of that year. Well, sir, after you said that, there were approximately 24 million cases of COVID, a Delta variant ravaging India in the months to follow, and there were almost 313,000 deaths from COVID, 3 of whom were my extended family. Now,
Mr.
you said there were
Krishnamoorthi,
reasons for...
Okay, so that's a really critical exchange there. Go ahead, Jay. What are you going to say?
So, okay, he ran roughshod over my response there. I had a 70-year-old cousin and a 70-year-old uncle, both of whom I dearly loved, that died in that Delta wave in India, in Calcutta. And I thought, I was stunned, actually, Bryce, that because it was such a cheap tactic on his part. Right? I assume he'd read that article. The purpose of the article was to talk about prioritizing vaccines for the people that would need them most to protect human life. And a lot of Indians died. He had 300,000. That was going to be more than that. The premise of this idea, I guess, is that if I write and say that there's a lot of natural immunity, that somehow that India let its guard down because of my article or something. But that's ridiculous, right? There's no way that India could have had its guard up to stop the Delta wave from happening or not. The best it could have done was use those vaccines to protect the most vulnerable, which it didn't do. Instead, what India did was that it prioritized young military personnel, young hospital personnel. It made the vaccines available over the internet so that large swaths of the poor of India couldn't get access very easily. It left large numbers of Indians unprotected, especially the most vulnerable Indians unprotected. The Krishnamurthi's is just it's just a mind-blowing display of demagoguery and ignorance in that one short little blip you saw right there. And then he runs roughshod over. You won't even hear that my cousin and my uncle also died. If he wants to play that card, I mean, I was absolutely devastated about what happened in India. The purpose of the article wasn't to say don't do anything about the pandemic, let it rip. The purpose was how to use the resources that were available to India to best protect the population, given that those resources were limited.
So, and as I mentioned to you before, it actually, if you look at the official transcript from, so just to go back, what he says is he says, you said there are reasons for optimism at the beginning of the year. And then he goes, well, sir, after you said that there were approximately 24 million cases of COVID, a Delta variant ravaging India in the months to follow, and there were almost 313,000 deaths from COVID. And then he says, 3 of whom were my extended family, to which you were trying to respond that you had also lost your family members. But in the transcript, because he continued talking, it simply just says inaudible. I was wondering, I actually had suggested that you may want to see if there's a way to go back and correct the record there, because you do clearly say that you lost family members too. So,
I mean, that's just shocking to me, Bryce. Absolutely shocking. But this is, as I said, it's among the lowest moments of the pandemic for me to have this representative in the House of the U.S. Congress act like a demagogue, using essentially my family members' suffering as a way to attack me is, it's among the low points for me of the whole pandemic.
Yeah. No, this was, yeah, when you had explained to me this exchange before I had watched this, I mean, it's perhaps the worst, it's sort of the worst instincts of lawmakers to do this to somebody, frankly. I'm not sure what really kind of possesses this guy to sort of decide to use this tactic to go after you, but you know, I don't know. It continues. It continues. So here we go. You ready to continue this?
I don't know if I am, but let's go.
All right. So
Family. Now,
Mr.
you said there were
Krishnamoorthi, my
reasons for
extended family
you said
also
there were
died.
reasons for optimism at the beginning of the year. Unfortunately, sir, there are reasons to question your judgment. Sir, you
sorry,
were an
can I-
expert
can I-
witness in litigation in
Can I
Tennessee,
respond to that,
correct?
please?
You
Can I
were an expert witness in litigation in Tennessee, correct?
by the way, there it is. Actually, so it was in this. So can I respond to that, please? That's where I got the suggested title for that. So one thing you can very clearly hear here is Jay is just not given any opportunity to speak in response to these.
And actually, can I one thought I just had before you
Yeah.
go on? When I wrote that there are cause for optimism, there were multiple causes for optimism actually in January 2021, in India and elsewhere. Right, it was a very different situation than January 2020 when the virus was new and we didn't have a vaccine. How could you not look at the situation in January 2021 and not say there were cause for optimism? He seemed to think that any cause of optimism was somehow by itself a bad thing. Like anyone pointing out that there was, like, I mean, that's just frankly an anti-vax kind of sentiment. You have a vaccine that's available now in January 2021 that wasn't available in 2020, and that's not a cause for optimism. Throughout much of the pandemic, especially in the early days and into 2021, people who looked for causes of optimism were seen as were cast as bad guys. I think with the implicitly the idea was that if you pointed out that there were causes for optimism, people would let their guards down, that they would act in irresponsible ways, that they would, might send their kids to school or not mask their toddlers or something. That was a false way of thinking. It was not a virtue to panic the population. That caused a tremendous amount of harm, both in anxiety and in the population at large, but also panic led to demand for really, really destructive policies. It didn't really help anybody. And I think that the kind of premise that he has in his head, which he uses to essentially to like justify, I think, morally to himself, this really disgusting act of demagoguery. I mean, I think that I just wanted to make sure that folks listening to this notice that in Krishnamoorthi's comments.
I'm pretty sure. I think it's pretty clear, especially where I've paused it. It does look like he's he doesn't look like the nicest guy. Let's just say it that way. All right. So now, but he is now turning to you, being an expert witness in litigation. So let's see why he's asking about this.
Sir, you
sorry,
were an
can I-
expert
can I-
witness in litigation in
Can I
Tennessee,
respond to that,
correct?
please?
You
Can I
were an expert witness in litigation in Tennessee, correct?
Okay, I said in that article that I was arguing for vaccinating older people. 100 million doses should have gone to the old because I anticipated that there might be a wave.
Sir, in
That
that
is why I
article,
argued.
you said nearly 1 billion Indians have already been infected. The vast majority have recovered from infection and have lasting immunity to reinfection. You were dead wrong. Now,
I said
sir,
in that article that there were 100 million doses of the vaccine. You're mischaracterizing that article.
I'm
I said in
reading
that
your
article there were
article.
100 million
I'm
doses of
reading
the
your
vaccine
article.
available.
Sir, I'm
100 million
reading
that
your
should go to
very
the elderly
words.
because
Sir,
they were
how
still
much,
vulnerable.
Sir, did you participate as an expert witness in litigation in Tennessee?
Yes, I did. And Georgia and many other
and how
places.
much were you paid as an expert witness in that
None.
litigation?
I have taken no money for any of my activities on
I'm
COVID.
glad, because your advice and your testimony was worth what you were paid for
Can you
it.
pause, please? Can I
Yeah.
respond,
Okay.
please?
That, Jay. Wow. I got to say, one of the things I'd really like to understand here is how you didn't jump through your computer and I mean, what the heck? How did you maintain your composure there? That's insane.
I was still reeling about him bringing up his family members that had died in India, and I still, you notice he didn't let me explain, as I did here, what the article was actually about. I mean,
No.
anyone can go read it. And I assume he read it. I mean, maybe he didn't.
I doubt it.
Uh, the idea that people can get infected and that provides some protection against reinfection, there's a lot of evidence that is true still until there's a new variant. Of course, India was infected with the Alpha variant in 2020 and then the Delta variant in 2021. There were some people reinfected, but those reinfections were less likely to produce death than people who were immune naive and infected for the first time without a vaccine. He didn't want to engage with that at all, Bryce.
No, not at all. I mean, it's quite remarkable to sort of, play it back and sort of look carefully at what he's saying and what you're attempting to respond with, and how he simply just doesn't care. I mean, he's
It's
trying,
ironic. He talks about combating coronavirus cons. He's right there in the well of the House, sort of perpetrating a con on the American people. He's a representative. I mean, he has some. I mean, okay, he's a politician, but you would think he'd have some respect for the truth, and he had absolute no desire for it. And that, okay, so now the Tennessee case. Let me give some context of the Tennessee case, because he's asking about this case. Just as background, Bryce, I served as an expert witness on dozens and dozens of cases throughout the pandemic, starting from almost the earliest days of the pandemic, Bryce. Including in the earliest days, anti-lockdown cases. I was really, really interested in these school closure cases. In Florida, I served as an expert in August of 2020 in a school closure case where Governor DeSantis had ordered open that every school district had to have an in-person option for the schools. And the teachers' unions sued, and I was the only expert they could find that was willing to stick up for kids and say, look, the school that it was a good order, because I'd seen what the evidence out of Sweden was. And we won that case, ultimately. I'd been a pro bono expert on a whole bunch of church cases, trying to get the church allow churches to sort of exercise their First Amendment rights. I'd been an expert in a whole bunch of vaccine mandate cases, because I'd seen the evidence that the vaccine doesn't stop you from getting and spreading COVID, and then second, that I'd seen what the vaccine mandates were doing to the confidence that people are having in not just the COVID vaccine, but in other vaccines. And I was absolutely appalled by all of those. And I also thought from the beginning of the pandemic that it wasn't right for me personally as an expert to make money off of the suffering of others. And so I didn't take any money for any of these expert witness work that I did. I'd never previously been an expert witness I'm like, except for one case in 2006, I forget, it was a long time ago. I just hated that kind of work. I still hate that kind of work because it's very adversarial. Rather than trying to get at the truth, you're wrangling with a lawyer who's intentionally trying to be blockheaded, kind of like this guy. So I took no money for any of this work. And when he asked me about the Tennessee case, it was the Tennessee case was a case on mandatory masking in schools in Tennessee. It was brought, I think, by the ACLU, who was arguing that disabled kids would be harmed unless mandatory masking were allowed in Tennessee schools. And in that case, I'll tell. Maybe we can, as the Inquisition continues, maybe I'll give you some more details about that case. But that case was also I was pro bono. When he asked me about the Tennessee case, it was interesting that he went to how much I was paid, and the question in my mind was, did he already know the answer to that and ask me that? Because if a good lawyer, that's what you would do, right? You'd know the answer. My sense was he didn't yet know the answer, but he was very, very quick with the insult immediately.
Oh, he had that. That was his. He had that all set up. He's so proud of that. He was so. He wound that up. He's like, it's coming. My big line is coming.
Well, I mean, the irony is the guy absolutely knows nothing about any of these data that we're talking about, Bryce. He literally knows. He's the most ignorant person in that room, as best I can tell. And he's just this sort of I mean, okay, I need to be. I need to be great. I need to give him grace, but it's again, it's an act of demagoguery on his part to try to dismiss me without actually trying to engage with the evidence that I was trying to tell him. I mean, a scientist comes to the House, rather than trying to understand what evidence the scientist has to say, he just wants to treat this like a political matter.
Just grandstand, but if I'm being honest here, Jay, I really think his delivery was pretty flat. I'd like to see. Do you mind if we can sort of reconstruct and I can try to do his joke for him? Can
Oh
we do
dear
that?
God!
So here we're gonna go. You're gonna say, all right, here we go. I'm gonna say how much were you paid as an expert witness in that? Okay, and then you're gonna say, I've taken no money.
I've taken no money for my COVID work.
And I'm gonna say, well, I'm glad because. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, I ruined it too. Okay. Well, I'm glad because your advice and your testimony was worth what you were paid for it. Gotcha, Jay. Is that better or worse? I don't know. Perhaps.
Oh, Bryce, I don't think you have it in you. I have to say, you make a very bad demagogue.
I can't. It's hard. I mean, okay.
Well, okay. So now, if the problem is that, remember, you downgrade me from good friend to just friend. So maybe.
Well, now that I know you didn't take money from those cases, maybe we are good friends. Although a good friend might have given me the money, taken the money and given it to me instead of not taking the money.
God,
and how much were you offered? That's really the question. How much did you?
I think. I mean, I don't know. I didn't keep track of it. It's on. I mean, like literally dozens and dozens of cases where I was the only expert often that was willing to take the anti-lockdown side. You know, it was like, I mean, it had to be in the million. I mean, I don't know. I didn't keep
millions.
Track.
Wait, millions of dollars?
I mean, like people were. I knew experts, Bryce, and this just absolutely disgusted me that we're taking $3,000 an hour or more for their expert testimony work. And like you put in 50, 60, 70 more hours per case, more if you're like deposed. If you have to go fly out to the case or like actually do go in the case, it's a very lucrative business. And I mean, just to me, it seemed to me like I just couldn't morally justify taking money off the backs of the suffering of others.
Wait a second. You're telling me you turned down $150,000 for each of these cases? Is that what you're saying?
Some of the cases were shorter than others. I don't know exactly. I didn't keep track.
Well, let's discuss offline, Jay, what we should do in the future, where we can sort of set some shelving up and we can put it in there so it looks like you're taking.
It may be the case, Bryce, that we'll never have another situation where I'm like one of 4 experts in the world that are willing to take one side, where all the other people in the world are taking the other. So who knows? That situation will ever happen again.
That's true. Let's hope that's true. Okay, well, here we go. He's got you there with that really great line, and let's see where he goes from here. It's hard to improve from there. Let's see.
According to Judge in that litigation, Judge Crenshaw, he said, quote, "You were not qualified to speak on the issue that you were testifying on." And that, quote, "you were advancing a personal agenda." Close quote. That's from his opinion, sir. That's from his opinion.
Did you read the full opinion? Did you look at the bottom
I have it right here. I have it right here.
It literally says that I'm qualified under the Daubert, so that's just a misrepresentation.
Sir, he says here, the court, quote, "is simply unwilling to trust Dr. Bhattacharya."
Jay, what's the truth here? Can you clarify?
Yeah, so that case, as I said, involved mask mandates in Tennessee. And in that case, I cited a study called the Bangladesh Mask Study. It was one of, I think, 3 or 4 randomized studies that have been conducted on masking, on the efficacy of masking in preventing infection. And I cited that study in the context of that case because the opposing experts had mentioned that study. The thing about that study is that it literally has no children in it. And I quoted from that study saying that it has no children in the study, pointing out that it doesn't actually apply to the case. One of the authors of the study showed up as an opposing expert in response to what I had to say about that study, and he essentially accused me of misquoting the study or sort of saying something false about the study, even though what I'd said was 100% true about the study. The judge, who was wearing a mask during the time he was like on the bench, believed the author of this Bangladesh mass study rather than me, who was applying this study, accurately studying the study and applying it to the case, which is what is the efficacy of masking children. Of course, that study had no children in it, so you couldn't use the study, I thought, to assess whether it was right or wrong to mask children in this particular case. The judge, there's a thing called the Dalbert challenge. Essentially, it's a way of assessing whether someone has sufficient expertise to be an expert in a court case. The other side can challenge the expertise of somebody put forward as an expert, and the key thing that the judge had written is that there was no Dalbert challenge.
Oh, sorry, I just hit that accent. So yeah, go back to say the Dalbert is what is
Dalbert, there's a rule in court proceedings where you're the opposing lawyer, I'm the expert on against you. You can say you can post something called a Dalbert challenge, which says, oh, the expert that the other side brought up doesn't actually have the expertise to talk about this case.
It's like a Turing test, but for whether you're an expert.
Yeah, whether you're an expert. So what the judge had written very clearly was that I was an expert as far as the Dalbert challenge goes. He just didn't believe me relative to this other author of the Bangladesh mass study. And of course, it turns out he's wrong. The judge was wrong, right? The mask mandates do not actually protect the children from getting COVID. There's lots and lots of evidence from. In fact, just recently, for instance, there was a New England Journal piece that had been published looking at I forget exactly where, like a short period of time. One district had been masked up and another district not, and they concluded that the masked up district had less COVID. But there was a reassessment just published in the Annals of Internal Medicine of that same study, the New England Journal study, where they expanded out the number of months that they looked at and included more districts, and they found that there was no impact of the mask mandates on children getting and spreading COVID. There's all kinds of other things about this that I cited in my expert testimony about the lack of evidence that mask mandates were protecting children at all. And I think in retrospect that evidence was correct. In 2021 when I was citing it, it was quite controversial topic, right? But I think in retrospect, the mask mandates did not protect people from getting COVID, especially the cloth mask that children were wearing. And so I think the judge just simply just got wrong. Like he was looking at two experts. He himself did not have the expertise to decide between them. He thought masks worked, and so he sided with the expert that said masks worked. And that's essentially what the judge wrote, that he thought that I was wrong, which is fair enough.
Okay. Well, let's see what Krishnamoorthi thinks. Moving forward, we're coming up to, I believe, we're going to go through Florida and then I think Manitoba. I think that's where we're going. Let's see.
The court, quote, is simply unwilling to trust Dr. Bhattacharya, close quote. Did you participate as an expert witness in litigation in Florida? Sir, it's just a simple yes or no. Did you participate as an expert witness in litigation in Florida?
Yes.
Okay, in that particular case, the court said...
Which case is that? I don't know which one you're talking about.
This is the case in which you defended the governor's ban on mask mandates. Leon County Circuit Judge Cooper said his position was, that is referring to you, a distinct minority, and again concluded his interpretation of the study that you opined on was incorrect. That's a second piece of litigation that you were in.
Okay,
Sir,
so just so we're clear, that was overturned.
Did you
on
participate
appeal.
as an expert witness in litigation in Manitoba, Canada, sir?
Sorry,
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, quick question though. Do you think that he ever used opined before that moment? I don't think so. But go ahead. What are you going to say?
I don't know the answer to that question.
He probably was like so happy that he correctly pronounced that word. He's like, "What is this?"
People accuse me of opining all the time, Bryce. Literally,
you do. You're an opiner. I've always said that about you. But let's go to the substance here. Not so. What do you have to say about this? Because he's trying to run roughshod over you too.
Yeah. So like that case was a very similar case to the Tennessee case, except that unlike in Tennessee, we won the case. There, I again pointed to the Bangladesh mask study as not applying to school masking cases because the Bangladesh masking study only included adults. It did not include any children. And so it didn't apply to a consideration of whether mask mandates in schools in, Hillsborough County, Florida, or wherever, I forget exactly, no, Leon County, Florida, would work or would not work. Which I think, Bryce, I think that's actually accurate. Like you have a village randomized in rural Bangladesh to wearing, cloth masks or surgical masks, and you ask whether that village has lower rates of like COVID antibodies in the population after a month of it than a village randomly assigned to not wear masks or not be provided masks. That has, especially, and the application is only to adults in the village. I have no idea why anyone would think that would have any impact whatsoever on my understanding of whether having a school in Leon County, Florida, where children as young as 6 years old or 5 years old are required to wear masks would have any impact on the spread of COVID in that setting. That's the point I was making, which I think is a correct point.
Well, let's see if he agrees.
Did you participate as an expert witness in litigation in Manitoba, Canada, sir?
We actually won that. We won that case on appeal. You're misrepresenting the facts.
No, I'm not misrepresenting what the court said about your opinion, sir. And how about in Canada? How about in Canada, in Manitoba? You participated as an expert witness in that litigation as well before the Court of Queen's Bench, Chief Justice Joyal.
Okay.
Did you not?
Can we pause for a second here?
How about in Canada? Hold on, Jay. Let me get off this. There we go. Better freeze frame. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Although, by the way, you do not look happy at all here. I got to say.
Well, it's just like he's revisiting a bunch of my low moments, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Maybe just say, like, for most of these cases, I was participating as an expert witness. The courts, the judges in these cases were they, if you could see their faces, Bryce, they were all really, really scared. In 2020 especially, we lost case after case after case, even when the law was on our side.
You couldn't see their faces because they had masks on, Jay. You just said they had masks on, so I'm very confused.
Well, you can see them; they're covered. I mean, they just look scared and annoyed that anyone would be questioning the public health orders, and especially to have an expert question the evidentiary basis for the public health orders. And I mean, I don't know. Like, I think like the idea that we're losing cases by judges that it's essentially just like almost much of the rest of the laptop class population liked the lockdowns, liked the idea of other people being masked or whatnot, is not evidence that I was wrong. And so, like in Canada, this is this very similar thing. Like I was involved with two major anti-lockdown cases in Canada, one in Manitoba and a very similar one in Alberta. The Manitoba one we lost, and the Alberta one we won. Very similar cases involving church closures, lockdown orders, arresting pastors, closing businesses, just generally the lockdown policies. And I wrote a long, detailed, evidence-filled report for both of those cases. And it's available online. Anyone can go look. I mean, it was based on evidence that was available in like 2020, when in early 2021 for the Manitoba case, and then the Alberta case I think was later in 2021 into 2022. So that had a little more like up-to-date evidence. The primary thing I wanted to make clear in both of those cases was that there was an alternative. It was basically the Great Barrington Declaration. You need to take into account the age gradient of risk, and then use the resources you have to protect the vulnerable older while not harming the rest of the population, especially children, with the lockdowns. So I had a lot of evidence on those lockdown harms. The winning or losing of those cases has Canada and in those has a lot to do with, are there constitutional protections available for the free exercise of religion rights? It turns out in Canada, There isn't. If there is a public health order that says a church must close, then there's no First Amendment in Canada that says that people have the right to worship, with the government not being able to tell them no. And the way that the judges dealt with the evidence is they essentially just I'm sure they didn't like what I was saying. They didn't have the expertise to judge whether I was right or some other expert was right, but they essentially said none of that matters. The public health people get to decide what happens during a pandemic, and there is no constitutional protection for free exercise of religion, in effect. That's what they said during a pandemic in Manitoba.
Seems fair. I mean, why not? As we know.
Well, I mean, I wasn't opining, if you will, on whether the law should or should not allow the free exercise of religion during a pandemic. That was not my role. My role is just to provide my view of the scientific evidence on the efficacy of lockdowns, the harms of lockdowns, and the potential availability of other strategies that might have been used other than lockdowns to protect the population.
Now, Jay, all well and good, but here is actually, we're about to turn to what I consider my favorite part of this hearing, and I was shocked, utterly shocked to learn this about you. So are you ready for this next part? I think we're all going to be stunned when we learn this new fun fact about Jay. Here we go.
You participated as an expert witness in that litigation as well before the Court of Queen's Bench Chief Justice Joyal. Did you not?
I did.
And in that, sir, again, the court went through your opinions and said, quote, your opinions are not supported by most of the scientific and medical community, close quote. And sir, that was not one on appeal in any case. Sir, you quote something called the Ministry of Truth, which you jokingly refer to in your in your opening testimony.
Can I respond?
All right. Sorry. Yeah, I guess we're about to get to my favorite part.
No,
yeah,
hold on, just real fast.
Get some more digs in there. Go ahead.
I want to respond. I was not joking about the Ministry of Truth. I was not actually. It was a literary citation to Orwell.
Right. Well,
and I really do think that that's a serious problem. That the government should not have the capacity, especially if the government is represented by this guy, to distinguish between what's true and false, and then censor people who they think are saying false things when in fact they have no idea the distinction between true and false. Sorry, that was petty.
No,
please go on.
I had forgotten that he also mentioned the Ministry of Truth, because Raskin, of course, made a
bigger deal of it.
Made a bigger deal of it. So yeah, this is I'm sorry.
I'm quite proud of the Ministry of Truth line. I mean,
it's great. It's great.
I think I'm the first one in this context to like bring it up in this way.
You may be. I mean, we'd have to. I don't know how you determine that, but
I hadn't seen it. So,
all right. So here we go. This is the part that I consider shocking. It made me really question what I was getting into when I started working with you, Jay. So here we go. Oh wait, hold on. This you got to make sure you get the full. Okay, here we go.
About it. Oh my God, Bryce, I can't.
What's that?
I'd forgotten about this.
Oh, you forgot about this part. Oh, conveniently, of course. Here we go. All right.
Are you aware of something called the, quote, Publicity Department of the Chinese Communist Party?
No.
Okay, I presume that you would never want to talk to an organ of the Publicity Department of the Chinese Communist Party, right?
Hold on a second, Jay. Is that true that you never want to talk to an organ? An organ of the Chinese. What is an organ of the Chinese? Is that a thing? Is an organ a thing? Did he say organ?
I think it's like an extension of a part of. I don't know.
Organ. Did we? I was very shocked.
Out, like breeze in, and I don't know.
So so an organ.
No, the answer is no. I don't. I'm not interested in talking to propaganda. But on the other hand, I was willing to talk to this dude who's like at least as bad in terms of propaganda.
Well, let's see what you say when you're, under oath. How do you answer whether you've talked to an organ when you're under oath? Okay.
I presume that you would never want to talk to an organ of the Publicity Department of the Chinese Communist Party, right?
I don't know anything about it.
Sir, you gave an interview on May 5th, 2020 to China Global Television Network, which is owned by the Publicity Department of the Chinese Communist Party. And you know what they did with your interview? They posted it on their Facebook page.
Wait a second. Are you telling me that something you gave an interview to posted the interview?
On their
Jay,
Facebook page.
Shocking.
Okay, so let me just. Oh God.
Just
Just Bryce.
Go
Just
ahead.
before I get into this, let me just say I was just red baited on the floor of the House. Okay, I'm not. I'm not trying to say that this is like the House Un-American whatever. The HUAC committee that went after
Yeah.
like all the communists. But that is literally what just happened, right? You had a Democratic congressman red baiting me on the floor of the House, accusing me of like being some dupe of the Communist Party of China.
Here it comes. This we got it. This is the killer line right here. Ready?
You became a mouthpiece of the Publicity Department of the Chinese Communist Party in early 2020. Congratulations.
Jay, I was stunned. I was stunned to learn that you were a mouthpiece for just the Communist Chinese Party in early 2021.
The guy is such a bad demagogue. I mean, it's just laughable how stupid he is. Sorry, I shouldn't be insulting him, but I have to say that it's Bryce. Okay, so let me just set the stage for this and like tell the story about this, right? So I'd conducted a study in early April 2020 in Santa Clara County, California, measuring how many people had antibodies to COVID.
The Santa Clara study, as I know it.
Yeah. I conducted another study the week after in LA County that found a very similar result. Basically, that there are like 3 or 4% of the population of Santa Clara County and then LA County had COVID and recovered by early April 2020. That was like for every person that had been identified with COVID and gone to the hospital or come to the attention of the public health authorities, there are 50 people walking around with antibodies, 40 people walking around with antibodies, suggesting that they already had COVID, that had never come to the attention of the public health authorities. That had like major implications for like were lockdowns going to work. The implication was the horses already are out of the barn. There's not much we can do. We don't have a technology to stop the spread of the disease. The lockdowns which had been in place for 3 weeks, had not managed to protect the people from the disease spreading. And that the infection fatality rate was like 0.2%. I've never had more attention to any research that I've ever done in my entire life, and I suspect I never will. We put it out as a preprint working paper, the Santa Clara study, and how like you send papers to journals and you get 2 or 3 people writing back as referee reports. I'm sure you've had much joy with that. I had over 1,000 people who gave me referee reports unsolicited on Twitter and on email and elsewhere overnight after we put that paper out. It had, I think, the highest or the second highest or among the highest altmetric scores of any paper published in the history of papers. Altmetric meaning like online attention.
We need to revisit that. So I was one of the people that was dunking on you back then. I think I talked to you, and of course, let's be fair. I didn't read your study at all. I just was going off what people were saying to me, as I always do.
Well, I didn't mind the scientific attention. I mean,
no, but they were attacking you, and I mean, it was like saying you're an idiot, all the stuff, because people didn't want to believe those results. And I think it's one of the things we had talked about going back and doing a evaluation of what happened with the Santa Clara study, like revisiting Santa Clara.
We certainly can do that. I don't want to revisit that right now, but because I do think the study was right. There were like dozens and dozens of other independent teams that did seroprevalence studies in the full year after we conducted that study, and they found very, very similar results to us, no matter where in the world you looked. Older places that had older populations tend to have higher infection fatality rates. Places that had younger populations had lower. We were like smack dab in the middle of that seroprevalence literature, and of course we were very, very early in the game. I think we might have been the first major team to like put out a seroprevalence, certainly with a paper.
One problem that I had with the study, Jay, is that it involved you having to do what I consider actual research, which is you were moving liquids around during those experiments required liquid moving, and that's something unusual, right, for you?
I will confess, Bryce, that it may have been one of the very first studies where I actually had to move liquids around, or had liquids
You-
around moved on my behalf by
you-
other researchers who were
what-
working with me.
That's right. And I think you learned your lesson, which is to stay in your lane and not move liquids. Like let the professional liquid movers do the liquid moving.
Apparently my lane doesn't include expert witness testimony, opining in the well of the house. I mean, I don't know what my
Opining.
lane actually is at this point in my career, Bryce. So
You, so
podcasting.
you're a podcaster, which I think is a very, that's, no,
Anyway,
you're not.
so
You're more than a podcaster. You're a cultural icon, as I've said.
I
And
don't
a
know if I
good
like that
friend,
any better.
and a good friend, Jay.
Oh my God, I've been upgraded. Okay, now I'm really touched.
So-
Okay, so now the thing is, that study also got a tremendous amount of media attention in the U.S. and everywhere else around the world. I was getting calls from, I mean, you name the country, I was getting calls from people.
China, Jay. China. That's the country that you got to call.
And so
from.
I didn't know anything about media,
Yes.
right? I had never, I think I'd been on TV once before in again in 2008, my mom watched. And so I'm like, I just said yes to everything because I figured a scientist that's has an obligation to talk to the public when they have a result that's important that they think the public ought to know about.
I
And
agree.
so I just said yes to every single media request. And that Chinese one was kind of it was odd. I mean, I just I confess the person contacts me. Do I want to do this? I'm just like, sure. I talk about the seroprevalence study for just a bit, and then they're asking me about whether I think Chinese researchers are productive people or something, and I'm like, yeah.
Wait, how did you answer that? We need to actually find this, and we can sort of splice
I'm
that
sure.
into
So if you look on Facebook, maybe it's still there. Who knows?
Did you disparage America in this video?
No, I did not disparage.
Okay.
I just said that, look, there are researchers from all over the world that I believe are going to contribute to our knowledge about COVID, including from China. And I look forward to learning from everybody. That's what I said.
And were you compensated for this video that was on Facebook for the
I
CCP?
paid literally $0.
Well, Jay, I take you at your word. As I've always said, I take you at your word, that you did not get compensated. You got to take a man at his word. We don't know for sure. We just assume
I did.
that
The compensation was the good feeling that comes from informing the public about good science, Bryce.
informing and serving as a mouthpiece of the organ of the Communist Party of China
I'm still
feature.
okay. Do I get some history prize for being red baited by a congressman on the floor of the House?
Let's go back to that for a second, because what happened after the hearing? So
Can we just we should have the Army McCarthy hearings playing in the background of McCarthy going after people for being communists on the floor, and I was I half expecting someone to pipe up with, "Sir, have you no shame?" Just that kind of thing, but it didn't happen, unfortunately.
No, well, I think it was a very strange ending, right, to the whole thing. It kind of took a very sharp turn at the end. I would not have anticipated it leading to you being a mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, you caused his family members to die at one point. You then were a non-credible expert witness that was wrong, dead wrong.
Although still brought on for case after case after case after case, despite that.
That's correct. But dead wrong again and again and again, proven wrong. And then right at the end, and what were you thinking there? You're like, why is he talking about that? Right? I mean, I was just stunned.
I was stunned. I was just I've never encountered demagoguery aimed at me in that particular way. It was worse than the Raskin thing, which maybe we'll do later. It was much worse.
We'll do the
because the guy Raskin is actually, I believe, an intelligent man. This was just pure demagoguery with no real thought behind it, other than I'm going to make you look bad.
I'm actually wondering about this, because maybe we can get Krishnamurthi to watch this and perhaps feel a little bad, right? Because have people ever done this before where they got destroyed as a witness in front of a lawmaker and then sort of did an hour dissection of what happened? Because
Oh no.
I would love to have him. I would like to talk to him about it and like go through it with him too, and just sort of figure out like what was he drinking? You saw a little can. It was like a red can. Like what was that? Was that cranberry juice? Did you use? What did you need to fire up for
To his
attacking him?
credit, I mean, he's going after me for like telling people that mask mandates involving cloth masks for children have no effect. He himself was not wearing a cloth mask or a mask at all.
This is
And
yeah. Well,
Floor
well,
that's when he was doing this. So there's some irony
the
here.
lines would not land as well if he had a mask on. It would not look as cool. So of course he's not gonna have a mask on. But he pretty much took you through the ringer there. You got the murdering, you've got the incompetence, you've got the potentially conflict with the Chinese Communist
No,
Party.
I'm a mouthpiece.
What, right, yeah. All of which, maybe non-compensated. And to be fair, you shouldn't have been compensated according to him because you deserve $0. So if you took $0, the guy just really went scorched earth on you. And luckily, I think where's he from? Is he from Illinois or what is he?
He's from Illinois, yeah.
I wonder if he must have done the residents of his district proud to do that. Serving democracy very well.
I mean, I'm supposed to forgive my enemies, Bryce. That's my call. Like my faith calls me to do that. And I have prayed over this guy, and I'm forgiven. But you have to say, I don't. Let's going back over this. I don't think he served his people well. I don't think he served the American people well by what he did. He had no curiosity whatsoever about.
So yeah, and that actually let me be very serious about this because that is a disgraceful display. Like what he did was a joke. Like it's one thing to just do this pontification. Sometimes they'll just talk for 5 minutes, right? They don't even what he did there was like it was irresponsible. It was reckless at harmful. I mean, this was during the time period where you were getting death threats too, right? Like this is no joke. Like, so the lawmaker there is just completely just trashing you to score political points, I guess. But nothing he said was in any way, shape, or form a good faith comment. There was no good faith. There was nothing there other than, like you said, demagoguery. I guess the red baiting out of the blue. I mean, all of a sudden he's red baiting. Just disgusting. And really, we should demand better in our democratically elected officials, even if, they and it's not just you that this has been done to, frankly, right? So I don't know. I guess, has there been any contact between you and this guy since then, or just
No? I posted a thread on Twitter responding to it after it happened.
Right. And I have it here. I have it. I can read it.
I mean, actually, I have to say, I was sort of new on Twitter, and I didn't have podcasting then, but I wish I had, because it actually felt good to be able to respond somewhere publicly. Because before I was on Twitter, I would have just I would like, okay, I wouldn't know how to process, or because I had no way to respond, right?
Yeah.
At least
Would
on
you
Twitter,
like me to read it for you?
Sure.
All right. So here's what you begin. You say, I had the honor of testifying today in the US House Subcommittee on the COVID response. The topic was on misinformation. Ironically, I was attacked by Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi from Illinois with misinformation. First, by quoting out of context, he mischaracterized a piece I wrote in January 2021. You use the word contra here. You use the word, you're like contra the congressman. That's actually like an actual word. Wow, this is fancy. Contra, not like the rebels, like there was the Ollie North scandal. Okay, contra the congressman, I did not argue the epidemic was over. I argued for prioritizing the elderly in India with the limited vaccine doses it had at the time. Second, he falsely stated a judge disqualified me as an expert in a child mask mandate case. The judge did not agree with my assessment of the science of child masking. Other judges in other cases not mentioned by the congressman have agreed. Finally, the congressman red baited me. I gave an interview in May 2020 regarding a study I ran to a Chinese TV station. It is shameful that a congressman would try to insinuate that I support the Chinese government because I communicated a scientific result to the public. Ironically, the congressman made the main point of my testimony. Since unqualified people are in charge of policing misinformation in media and big tech, scientists risk being smeared if they speak up. No wonder so many have stayed silent as lockdown disaster has unfolded. That was you, right after the hearing, still showing some level of grace in spite of, I don't know,
I'd be happy to sit down with them. I don't hold any grudge or animosity with them. I do wish that the American people were represented by a better class of representatives. Like, I think, I mean, I'm not a politician. I'm not ever going to be a politician. I'm not, I mean, it seems like politics is a very nasty game, but this was a pandemic that required honest engagement with people in good faith who maybe looked at evidence differently from other, one other. If I were a congressperson in the House, I would have sought out experts that I had an inclination to disagreed with me. I would have sought out experts from lots and lots of points of view so that I could get a good sense of how best to protect the American people. This guy had made his mind up long before he saw me.
So we should probably wrap up. I think this is kind of, it's a little bit, actually, before we go, what was your thought? Because I don't know if you'd watched that again since had you actually rewatched that or no?
I had not rewatched that.
Wow. Okay. So this was even, so what are your thoughts looking back at it, 3 years later?
I mean, I think I don't hold any animosity or grudge toward Krishnamurthi. I do think that he did not serve the American people well. And I've long thought about what I would have done if I were a representative or a governor or a senator or whatever during the pandemic. And I think I would have sought out experts with very different opinions. I think that, and I would have tried to inform myself that way, especially if I didn't have any science background, as he apparently doesn't. I would have sought out people who thought very differently and then asked them sort of to engage with each other in good faith, or to engage with the arguments of each other in good faith, so that I could form some judgment. I think that our representatives owed us that, and it grieves me to see that he failed at that task. And so many, actually, he had already made up his mind about me and about the science of COVID, and in I mean, I think he had it wrong at the time. There was enough evidence to know that he'd gotten it wrong at the time. But at the very least, you can say in retrospect, those school closures were pretty damaging. Those mask mandates didn't really protect those kids or the teachers very well. Those lockdowns really hurt our small businesses, and civil rights were violated at scale. And this misinformation sort of censorship campaign, I think it really damaged our ability to speak to one another when we most needed to be able to do so.
Well, that's a little too serious for me, Jay. I don't like being this serious. I get a little uncomfortable when we're talking that serious, because that was like
sorry, Bryce. Well, now that we're good friends, I'll try to bring some levity back into things.
Keep it light. This is too much. This is too heavy for me. I'm not used to serious subjects. I'm used to doing joke videos and stuff. So.
Your job is only to save the world from another lab generated pandemic.
That is right. Yeah, that is right. And we're doing pretty good on that one. We got this bill we're going to be fighting for, as you know. So
5 years since the last lab generated pandemic, Bryce. 5 years and counting.
On my watch, Jay, there's been none. And actually, as I said to you, I now have a very, very strong incentive, if there is another lab-generated pandemic, to really participate in the cover-up so that I can claim that there's no lab-generated pandemic on my watch. It's a little bit strange, right, how this works. So, okay. So, Jay, do you want to sign off on this thing?
Yeah, so this has been fantastic, Bryce. Thank you for letting me have my say finally. This is Professor Jay Bhattacharya on Science from the Fringe, speaking with my good friend, Professor Bryce Nichols.
Very, very good friend. Now we're very good friends.
Excellent. Until next time, take care.